You got to have a fire.
Well, not really.
You're not being well looked after here.
That's fine. Yeah. Cool.
No worries. I should stick this on flight mode so I don't get some incoming interference in the process.
Good. There's lights, I guess. Hello, hello. Sure. It's just easy for me to go back. Yes, back part of that. I'm just going to do like a I'll just get like four.
I've got to be.
You're an industrial designer.
I am.
Fantastic.
Independent. So
Wonderful. What's your mob call?
my mob,
Great. Here's my card. Let's go and have a chat one day about industrial design, because you guys are the only guys who are getting IP right.
Speaking with people too, there's another one.
What?
Well, the only sector that I sense is really taking IP seriously on industrial one. I think.
Okay. I don't know who you are.
No worries.
So whereabouts in Sydney do you live, Marco?
I am.
Richard. Piedmont, that's a lovely spot. You barrack for the Balmain Tigers?
Wow. That's freaky, isn't it?
Yep. No worries.
Yeah, that whole doppelganger thing.
You'd be needing sort of a heart transplant. What happened against Melbourne? Oh,
It's a little bit confronting.
Yeah, mics straight in your face are always a weird
It'll
experience.
disappear after a while. Should have done what Richard's done, got some.
well, these are pretty weird-ass questions. How about this? What does originality...
Good evening, everybody. So I can invite those still standing to make your way. Lots of seats up the front, so don't be scared. I don't think our panelists bite. They seem to be fairly friendly, but we'll see how they go by the end of the night. Welcome everybody to our final dialogues for the year. I can't believe we've made it through 3 already, so this is our last one, the 3rd one for the year. My name's Scott Bagnall, I'm from the Design Institute of Australia. As you may have seen through our comms sent out through our database, if you're not on our database, make sure you leave your business card. We'd like to welcome our online guests this evening. We're streaming this event live through the DIA website for all of our members. You can log on to the DIA website to view tonight's event live, and we're hopefully looking at posting them up online after the event. So if you missed the first two, there was some great topics covered in terms of those first two, so you'll be able to retrieve them online, and we'll send up some communication in terms of where they are located. They'll be on the DIA website, so you can view the first two of our dialogues for the year this year. A little bit of housekeeping, if you haven't already found it, exits out the back and toilets through the back doors as well, down the end of the corridor on the right. Turn off your mobile phones if you've got them, put them on silent. If they're in your possession. Tonight's topic, authentic design and intellectual property. It should be a really interesting topic. Before we jump into that this evening, I'd like to welcome Peter Florenzos, Queensland Branch President of the Design Institute of Australia, to give you a little bit of quick summary of some of the other exciting DIA events that we've got coming up. So please welcome Peter.
Hello everybody. Good evening. It's a pleasure to see so many of you here tonight. As co-president of the DIA Queensland branch, I've played witness over the last several years to Queensland taking action and being recognised as a centre of design, innovation, creativity and economic development, even with these current economic challenges. It is in these more challenging times that Queenslanders thrive and utilise creative economic drivers where we push boundaries of innovation and creativity. The DIA Queensland branch has a vision and a belief that design has the potential to change the world. We are no better equipped here than to rise to this challenge through our strength and our regional diversity. This is truly what makes the Queensland branch unique and allows us to see the world through a slightly different lens. Design is the vehicle for business growth, and the economic pillars identified by the federal and state governments, including construction, resources, tourism, agriculture and services, all uniquely require design and design services. It's the clever businesses and successful corporate enterprises that are embracing designers and maximising our potential and putting us in their boardrooms as critical parts of all of their businesses. The DIA champions the importance of building the commercial and cultural wealth in Australia through our strength and collaboration with many other design bodies and the key industry, education and government representatives. We do have a strong passion for the value of design and its social, cultural and economic impact on society. DIA is the voice of professional design in Australia, and we represent over 20 design disciplines, and we connect design disciplines across all sectors, including manufacturing, built environment, communications and business. So when we say the voice of professional design, we mean the voice, and there is no better voice than DIAlogues in advocating the importance of design. DIAlogues is about you, and this is your voice. It is your opportunity to express your thoughts and sometimes deal with often controversial and difficult issues facing our profession. Not only do the panelists have the opportunity to express their views, we look forward to your opinions and we encourage you to put up your hand. We encourage you to express that voice by Twitter feed. We encourage you to talk more about it after DIAlogues has finished. And we look forward to one day engaging with you in your dialogue on a particular other topic. And perhaps there's members within the audience here tonight that could be invited to appear on a future DIAlogues panel. We encourage that voice, we encourage that dialogue, and we're really, really passionate about the format and collaborating with others. DIA is a member-based volunteer organisation, and we are run by designers for design and design business. If you're a buyer of design services, if you're a designer, an educator, a student or a design industry leader and not currently a member, I strongly encourage you to join and be part of DIA and start contributing to this process of building our profession. Being part of DIA is not just about what you get. It's not about what we're going to give you. It's really about what you're going to give the profession. And when you give to your profession, I assure you it'll always give back to you for the betterment of all designers and all of our community. So please be part of DIA. Just in terms of some upcoming events, we're running our 7x7 DIA talk series at the Gold Coast on the 1st of November. DIA is also running its Bubble and Speak Inspiration Breakfast series on the 17th of October at Emporium Hotel. And DIA is endorsing and supporting Big Sound Music and Design Conference, which is coming up in September. There's a huge lineup of speakers there, and in the same week there's a really big design overload here in Brisbane, where we're having Creative 3 Forum at QUT Gardens Point. You'll be able to pick up these flyers for Creative 3 and Big Sound. We're also supporting the Typism Typography Conference next week at on the Gold Coast on the September the 4th. So I'd just like to also at this point remind everyone that tonight's Dialogues event allows DIA members to accrue 4 CPD points to engage in your ongoing path to becoming an accredited designer. So we really are pushing that accredited designer status, and if we can get more accredited designers on board, that helps the industry boost its professional status. So yes, 4 CPD points per seminar. At this point, I'd just like to throw to Mark McDean, our moderator for tonight's panel, and look forward to the dialogue from the team and everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Oh, it's working. Great. Hi, I'm Mark. I'm more Stephen Fry than Tony Jones as moderator. Firstly, I'd like to introduce you to the panel. Paul van Barneveld, National President of AGDA, Australian Graphic Design Association. Phew, okay. Elliot Bledsoe, freelance design, digital and social consultant. Andrew Shapiro, Managing Director of Shapiro's Auctioneers. Bjorn Ruth, designer. Great title. John Kenny, solicitor, Kenny and Co-Solicitors. And Richard Maneo, Managing Director, Corporate Culture, and founder of the Authentic Design Alliance. Okay, let's get started. My little brief before we get started is, are Grant Featherston, Mies van der Rohe, and Charles and Ray Eames rolling in their graves? Is it a compliment to be copied? As designers, and to be the best at what we do, we must question at which point the barrier between inspiration and reproduction lies. How we can protect our own intellectual property, or IP, and what are the legal loopholes that allow for design to be reproduced. Supporting authentic design means to acknowledge and respect the intellectual property of designers. One side of the argument states that supporting original design will assist in maintaining our industry's design heritage and ensuring the future of our creative work. Pardon me. It also guarantees better control in areas such as fair working conditions in manufacture, as well as minimising the environmental footprint. Furthermore, original design is seen as an investment, gaining in value over time, where replicas become valueless. On the other side of the argument, replicas are seen to make design accessible to people who wouldn't normally be able to afford it. We question the effects of authentic design on a global scale and address the cultural, social and legal aspects in the authentic design and intellectual property debate. Much of the design industry is faced with authentic design and intellectual property issues on a daily basis. Hence, it seems too fitting to address this topic in our third DIAlogues Interrogation Forum. Interrogation is such a seriously aggressive word. Anyway, our passionate expertise panelists will cut down to the core of these issues in what will be a cracker of a discussion. Okay, before we begin our interrogation of tonight's panelists, I'd like to invite each of our panelists to provide a 1 minute, and I've got a bell up there somewhere, a 1 minute summary of their position in the authentic design intellectual property debate. Richard, let's go backwards.
Oh, thank God.
Well, obviously, I'm very passionate about this subject matter. I founded with 4 other members the Authentic Design Alliance, really on the basis of educating the value that you mentioned earlier about what investment buying original is. I think, generally speaking, it's important that we, as a society, see the benefits where original design has been cherished in other countries and understand the value that it brings to the Australian society. The recently launched Cultivating, which really shows our support for authentic design and what it does later in life. I mean, our view is build to last, not design to disassemble. And the other thing that's lost in this discussion is what it does for Australian design, or what it doesn't do for Australian design. So that's my view, and it's well within a minute.
Wow, that's like 59 seconds. Great. Elliot.
Right, okay. Well, I'm going to be completely honest and say I didn't know what authentic design was, but as somebody who's done a law degree, I took a legislative interpretation approach and figured it had to be what the general meaning of it would be. But as somebody who has spent a long time working in alternative approaches to copyright management, particularly in response to digital technologies, and looking at things like open source technology and open content licensing, I kind of come from the position that while intellectual property might be nice in theory, when law says yes and when law says no and technology says yes, are there other alternatives that you can take if copyright's not necessarily going to protect you?
Great, a legal guru. Fantastic. Bjorn.
Well, I thought it was important to frame design as not necessarily an aesthetic treatment, but something that solves a problem. It might be the design of a system. It really is far greater than the way something looks. I think it's very important when we speak later in regards to furniture and whatnot. And I certainly I'm in the business of creating ideas and systems and solutions, and as such, I develop intellectual property all the time, but I'm in the business of producing it, not in protecting it.
Oh, okay. Wow, less than 1 minute. John.
I think it's marvellous that we have a representative in the design food chain, Richard, as a retailer, talking about the protection of design, which really should be the responsibility of the profession. So I really think we're being shown up here in the economy by someone who exploits design rather than creates it. I think designers have not only an obligation to deal with intellectual property, but they have opportunities in the area of intellectual property which are going to waste. None of the peak industry bodies in the Design Alliance, with the possible exception of architects, have a position on intellectual property. And I wasn't here for the debate on design education last week, but I'm pretty well acquainted with the absence of any training on intellectual property at any of the major design schools. So I think we have a gorilla in the room. Designers produce more intellectual property than any other creative sector. On any one day, we could produce trademarks, copyrights, design patents, and I dare say in the confines of design, there's lots of secrets being produced. So designers should get serious about intellectual property, and they're a long way short of that now.
Thanks, mate. Andrew, I'm very interested from an auctioneer's point of view.
Thank you. I've spent the last 30 years in what we call the auction industry, the secondary market for design. I'm a big fan of authentic design. By being in the secondary market, we have the luxury of looking at the past, the last 100 years, which is now the 20th century, and now the 21st century, and reviewing to see what is the most original, what is the most authentic. I've been very pleased to see us profile so much of Australian material culture, which was ignored and is now highly sought after as being very original. Earlier we talked about Grant Featherston, Clement Meadmore, Douglas Snelling. Most of these things, when I arrived in Australia in 1989, were at the tip. And now they're all, with great pleasure, I get to see them in the Queensland Art Gallery, the National Gallery in Melbourne, National Gallery in Canberra. Intellectual property to me has always been a problem in Australia. I think there's not enough respect for it, and I think the copyist is taking over. The market has been flooded with inferior copies, and I hope in this discussion today we can somehow find a solution to limiting those copyists.
Great, thank you. And Paul, your minute starts now.
Thanks. It's an interesting point because from a communication perspective, we actually, we're not actually producing anything that can be copied, so to speak. But, and to think about authentic design, I actually took it from the designer's perspective and actually more about honest design and what does that mean, and that if you are actually creating something, that it's actually something that has purpose and that it actually fulfills a need. As far as the intellectual property debate is concerned, I know that the communication design industry is completely not up to speed with what that actually means to them as a designer, but from a business perspective as well. But I think that's just generally because there is no education about it. There is, and people are just this incredibly, but it's not just designers, it's other people as well. An example was a lawyer in Perth who actually was developing some terms and conditions, and in the version that he sent through to AGDA for consideration was that as soon as the client pays their bill, all IP and copyright is assigned to them. And it's like, there's no value placed on all of that. As John said, you know, we're creating IP all the time. It's valuable, it's our intellect, it's our thought. And there's no one's putting any value on it. So it's not just designers, it's I think Australian society in general.
Great. So there is where we stand, guys. First question, and firstly I'm going to throw it to the audience, and you need to vote. So our first question for the night is there such a thing as an original idea? I need a yes or a no. The yeses? Oh, do we have a counter here? Okay, well, it's going to be hard. Yeah, okay, and there's no's? Oh, wow, guys, is that sort of equal? No? I think the yeses got it. Okay, the yes from the audience wins. Now I'm going to ask our panel to use their yes and no signs. And if they're undecided, they're allowed to hold them sideways. So guys, oh, I can't say, yeah, I can say all guys tonight. Is there such a thing as an original idea? Wow, gee, who will I get to speak now? Elliot, why no?
Look, it's not that I don't think that originality can exist, but I think it's a quite far-fetched and egotistical approach to think that you're the only person who's ever thought of any particular thing. I think that lots of designs, lots of ideas, lots of concepts, lots of processes, lots of methodologies are an iterative process that emerge over time. You look at things like the science profession. If you didn't have the transfer of ideas from one set of researchers to another, you wouldn't actually have innovation, extension, you wouldn't have ongoing discovery. So I think that originality
Yeah, but really
is
we're
possible.
talking about like fabric as opposed to molecules, really.
Well, you know, as I professed very obviously, I'm not a designer, but
Clearly.
also I think that it doesn't really matter what medium you're talking about. I think that the idea that you can have a completely original idea is far-fetched.
So iteration, for example, is very, very valuable. And while the result, while that process you may not view as original, coming to the idea that something demands iteration has to be an original thought. And I mean, certainly I take the position of yes, an original thought can exist because I have to believe that it exists because I'm a designer. I'm in the business of doing that. And certainly I find more often than not I don't have an original thought. But I mean, as an idea, it really is. I'm sure many of us have seen Everything is a Remix. It's a very interesting documentary surrounding this idea that everything's based on stimulus that we kind of gather from the world. But as designers, we have to assemble that stimulus in a new way, and it's in that process that it becomes original.
It's clear
But it's
that...
not just a derivation.
So, John, you're shaking your head a lot.
Well, it's clear that understanding of what intellectual property is missing from the discussion. It horrifies me that...
We're talking about original design here.
Yeah, but
not necessarily IP.
intellectual property is based on some version of originality. It's based on essentially not copying what's been done before. And there's different elements of originality that apply to the 5 elements of intellectual property that designers produce every day.
Of course, but we're talking about original, not originality.
I don't see the distinction. Intellectual property has a series of technical rules. If you comply with those technical rules, you're given various kinds of monopoly. That's what intellectual property rewards: creativity. It determines property. It is an encouragement to those who are creative. So I realise you're part of an alliance of people who are down on intellectual property for reasons that you failed to communicate to me. But for the rest of the people who are being retained to do original work, we produce intellectual property every day, and ignoring that we do that ranges from incompetent to negligent. So we should be dealing with those issues. You don't want to deal with them, others have to deal with them as part of their brief.
Okay. I lecture in communication design. I give my kids a project. The first thing they do is they open their laptops. And they have no thought of an original idea. And it takes me weeks to go knock them down. Richard, I'm interested in what you think about an original idea being from
I think
the furniture trade.
I think when we look at furniture, there's many original designs. Sure. Your argument might be that there's a chair, but there's been different interpretations of a chair. Now, inspired, I guess, is one thing that you might be also touching on, but I think there's a whole marketplace. I mean, if you look at what's happened, and let's go back to technology, which I'm not in that industry. I mean, we are in an industry, but we don't sell technology. I mean, IBM went out with a mainframe. Who came out with a PC? Was that not an original design? Sure, there's been many since then. But what I'm suggesting is that your view really stifles creativity.
Absolutely.
And your view should really, I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't have a view, but it's like my view on the Green Building Council as far as the environment's concerned. If you become prescriptive as to what is original, then you don't let people breathe. Right? And my view is that I believe that you would be using original things that you're not aware that they are original, right? So, but ignorance is not actually tolerance from our perspective. I mean, we need a society, the Opera House.
Absolutely.
I mean, look at the benefit of that. It is a brand of Australia.
Absolutely.
That was original.
Okay.
Denmark wishes they had it.
And
but you
so is
can't
a
copy
tea towel displaying the Opera House original?
Sorry?
Is a tea towel displaying the Opera House original?
We're talking about original ideas. We're not talking about everything being original.
The idea to put the Opera House on a tea towel is probably an original idea.
And could I just add, I'm wearing my grandfather's Opera House tie-pin tonight, so that was somewhat original. But then, in terms of original idea, I somehow listened to Katy Perry's new song this morning, and it's a rendition of Eye of the Tiger from Rocky days or something. That nothing's original in any way, shape or form in the creative world. I
But
sort
it's
of
an
reckon.
original response.
Yeah, or a reinterpretation of the original.
Well, response. I mean, you know, since the Egyptians and the Greeks were all just responding from their design vocabulary.
Yeah.
So, but I still believe there is original ideas every day, and that's what makes life exciting. And
Exactly. And Paul, so in terms of graphic design,
Well, I think that's a challenge because, as you said, a lot of people. What was the best one I've ever heard was a staff member said, "Oh no, I'm just drawing inspiration from my contemporaries," and I said, "No, that's copying." But I hope she's not watching. But the biggest thing is like originality. You know, that idea of out of necessity, you come up with ideas to solve a problem. And if someone identifies that there's a problem or there's something that can make someone's life better, and they come up with a solution to that nobody else has come up with, it may very well be an iteration of something, a chair is a chair is a chair kind of situation. But it's that point of going, well, that's a chair, but if we did the chair this way, then this chair's going to be better. How is that not? Yes, it's not a new chair. The chair is an original idea, but the chair was basically based on a rock.
Sure,
But the thing is, to come up with an idea to make that chair better that nobody else has done before, that has to be original. How can that not be considered an original idea?
I think this is a semantic and definitional argument. What I'm saying is that I don't think that an original response that relies on an entire history of design practice shouldn't be protectable. Of course it should. If it's interesting, novel, if it's innovative, but that doesn't make it an original idea. It is still a derivation. Nothing exists in a vacuum. So yes, I think that the idea that something is purely original, I mean, you have to be Robinson Crusoe, but even then, he still had a beach ball.
no, that was
well,
Tom
Tom
Hanks.
Hanks, whatever. But I guess what I'm saying is, I think this is a definitional conflict. I think this is about saying whether or not we're talking about protecting a new novel expression of something, or whether we're talking about protecting an original idea.
Well, we're not really talking about protecting at the moment. That's question
Thank
3 or
you.
4 or 5.
Well done.
We're just talking about an original idea. And I sense now from my lecturing experience that, kids just have, people have so much out there. There's the media, there's the internet, there's all those other things that I probably haven't had any experience at. That they have so many influences on them. So the idea of a creatively original idea in terms of fine art, fashion, graphics, is quite
a contestable issue.
And sorry, John, you were about
The sadness is that we are dealing with designers service industries. Here we have a member of an industrial sector which relies on original design, and he's being affected by the designer's inability to come to grips with intellectual property. No such problems with punk drummers or the music industry, which turns over millions of dollars of money in the protection of intellectual property and the payment of their creators.
What's this got to do with original idea?
Well, it's because the recognition of originality in music is worked into an industrial framework. His industrial framework is being poisoned by the ignorance of designers. And that ignorance is what this man relies upon when he comes up with these strange ideas about who's entitled to protection and not.
Well, see, that's why we get a bit of a balance here. We've got the design people and the legal people, Oh, that's right.
There are certain legal people who are on the side of design people.
What's that?
There are legal people who are actually on the side of legal people, and there are those,
But I
such as
think
my chums, who are
the
not.
crux of the initial question is, it's not about legality, it's not about whatever, it's about,
Sadly,
can I wake up tomorrow and have an original idea? I would have had some difficulty having an original idea about a chair, a table, a car, a house, maybe, but where does the original idea come from? Paul, any ideas? I need to make money. Throw them at me.
No, but it does come to, nobody told me that was happening.
Is that a fire
but I
alarm?
think that's what I was talking about before. Like, the argument that Elliot's put forward is there an original idea, and is the idea that there's something that has never existed before and somebody has created it, and that's where all the IP exists, and that's what you protect. The only person or thing or entity or being that I know that actually did that, if you believe in the creationist theory, was God. Because all things, you know, as you said, we draw inspiration from everything that we experience in a day. So does that mean, if you take that stance, there is no original idea?
And even then, there's a multiverse. Even then, there's a multiverse, and so you know, it is absolutely, as Elliot says, it is semantic.
Yeah.
I think we could debate on this point, you know, almost indefinitely. And certainly, I think it's interesting to see that. You know, we could almost agree that by Elliot's definition, there is no original idea, only original processes. But in which case, there's still some reason to protect that. And then
which leads us to the next question on value.
Precisely.
Okay, but before we get to question 2, and thank you for the Avon bell or whatever it's called, we're going to throw to the audience. Any questions? Oh, thank you. Thanks, guys, for that first question response.
First, I'd like to say that it's my view that an idea does not equate with a design. There's a lot of testing of that proposition. There's a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears that intercedes between the notion of having an idea and actually having a design. I think it's remarkable hubris to think you have an original idea. You may wind up with an original design at the end of a lot of follow-up work. So it's not so much a question, it's a comment. Thank you.
I was going to ask, is there a question as well? Thank you. Questions? Oh, come on, we had loads of them last time. Remember, there's no such thing as a dumb question. I say to my students, you're sitting there thinking, if I ask that question, I'm going to sound really, really stupid and dumb. But by all means, everyone else in the class wants to know the response. Oh, thank you. Wait for the microphone.
If there wasn't an original idea, did man just... Are we then just mere apes, or did someone actually have to start thinking first?
Something to think about God designing furniture.
Yeah,
anyway.
I'm not really going to get into a debate between Big Bang or creation theory or intelligent design.
No, that's next year. Thanks.
That might be next dialogue forum.
There's a question over there.
1 sec, we'll just get the microphone for you.
Back when there was no wheel, I'm sure many people thought that there was a way to move something better, but someone was able to put that there. So is it not just that someone's idea was brought together first? Because I'm sure 6 people out of whatever can have the same idea, but one's put it into a concept prior. So...
But that's what I was sort of saying before, that, you know, a lot of these tweaks or evolutions of something is because somebody identifies a need and realizes that, you know, it could actually be done better. So presents a, you know, a new, maybe it's not idea, maybe it's a new concept around how things can be done. So yeah, it's still, you know, they were still rolling things, but then someone decided to put a spoke in it. You know, it's very clever.
I don't think it's all.
So should we be creating new needs now rather than?
Well, I think that more and more that, you know, because we have become so much, you know, we're us as consumers, it's beyond just I want that chair. I want a chair that makes me feel good, or I want a chair that actually makes my life better. There's a lot of needs that are being fulfilled, and because people are saying, well, there's a market, let's create something to fulfill that need. So it's still happening, the evolution.
I think in the case of this wheel, I mean, that's still going to, using Elliot's model, be informed by things that are in the world, and absolutely playing into Elliot's hands here. Tim Brown of IDEO once said that originality is like our own form of censorship. And you can see that, look into history, societies that didn't adopt the technology of their rivals perished. And so in a lot of regards, there is some reason to think that certain ideas need to be available to the to everyone, but that perhaps the process or the manner in which that they reach that ultimate goal, that can still be original as it was back then when you didn't have stone, you used timber.
Richard, you have a response?
I think I just wanted to talk about evolution that we see in workplace design. So, for example, now we're seeing there's the Dutch model and there's a company called Velhoen that's actually, they've, in a sense, registered a theory, right? And that's design in my mind. It's not a physical product. Absolutely. It's a theory. CBA, Darling Quarter, is based on that theory, right? Now, that theory has meant that we work differently, or their views are that you work differently. So you take the lounge that was done many years ago, and then you change that to create a meeting room. Well, the person that does that in a way that's done first should really have the right to register that intellectual property. Why? Because they're talking to the market and they're responding to a brief, in a sense. Now, that is evolution. I'm not suggesting it is an original idea because it's never been done before. A lounge has been done, but it's never been done before, as one example. There's many of them, and I think design, in a sense, is not just about the physical. I mean, obviously I deal with physical product, but here is a company that registered a theory, right? They've now, as a Dutch company in Australia, exporting that theory. And this is where I think we need to get a grip of opening up, protecting our ideas, and challenging people to create, yes, it might be an inspired theory, but if it's new and it hasn't been done before, it's original. So that's...
Then the issue arises as to whether it's within the design brief of the designer to be able to tell his client about the legal implications of that. So the question is, do designers have a responsibility to learn sufficiently about intellectual property to intelligently inform their clients?
Well, that's where we need lawyers specifically dealing with design.
Not necessarily. What we need is design schools who don't patronise their students and have these issues taken off them and given to lawyers. It's not a matter of gelding designers and giving responsibility to lawyers. It's about empowering designers for them to make their own decisions about intellectual property. There's nothing special about intellectual property. If drummers in punk bands can work it out, designers can work it out.
But then, mind you, as a student, each work or whatever idea you have while studying is owned by the university or college.
Well,
so
that's because
personal IP goes out of the
industrial weakness of academics and students against the university economy that creates, funded programs that gelled my friend up there, Creative Commons. So can I say to you that there's a debate about intellectual property going on in this country right now, and designers are not part of it.
Because there's a weakness amongst designers as well. I mean, my best protection is to continue to create original ideas, because I'm not going to be as efficient as at protecting myself in a legal fashion as a lawyer. But I can be very effective in constantly staying ahead of the curve by creating constantly new ideas. And then beyond that, I also would never have the means to protect myself against someone if they really did plan to make a considered attack.
Okay, hold on. Has your question been answered? Yeah, thanks. I'm the same. Okay, sorry.
Just one point, and I think John...
Promise me that we get past question 2 before 8:30. This last session we had 6 questions, and we're still on question 2
Lead
at
us
the
on.
end.
Lead us on,
very
Mark.
quick,
We're ready to go.
Sorry, Paul?
I think
30 seconds.
John has a point, and I think as designers working with business, we're working in a commercial space, it's our duty to make sure that we understand what our role is working with business and understanding that what we're creating has value, and and understand what that value is worth.
Absolutely.
And it isn't up to the lawyers to tell us.
Absolutely.
Tell our clients for us. We should know, because we're working in a commercial space. We're business people, just like anybody else needs to know it. And I think that it's too easy for designers to wear the badge, I'm a designer, to say, oh, I'm a designer, I don't know about that. That is just not okay. That's not good business sense. It it's an easy cop-out.
Yeah, I think
we're business people, and that's what it comes down to.
I think you misunderstand my point. I mean to say that I am more effective in creating ideas than I am in protecting myself in the legal realm.
You should know what the ground rules
of course.
are.
Okay, guys, that could be something we discuss over a drink at intermission. Okay,
of course.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, question 2. Is that the thing I'm getting? I haven't done telly before, guys, so I'm getting all these things from up the back. Okay, question 2.
Question 3.
Question 3?
It's question
3. Let's rock.
I've got question 2 here.
It's
That's
question
fine.
2 after question 1.
Okay, here's my... I'm being paid a hell of a lot of money per hour for being here, and my question 2 is, our second question for the night is, can intrinsic value only exist with the original? Yes or no? Can intrinsic value not yet? Audience first. Can intrinsic value only be? I'm going to read upside down here. Only exist with the original. I know where I'm going to stand on this. Yeah, hands up. Yes or no?
Sorry.
Hey, we got one yes down here. What do you reckon? What do you reckon? Oh, should we have a yes, no, I don't know? What about a no? A no. Oh, well, I don't see too well, but from my point of view, the no's have won. Panel, can intrinsic value only exist with the original? Richard, come on, Richard.
I think from my point of view...
Does on mean in the middle of the road?
Shit.
Sorry. I'm a no.
Wow. Why are you a no? Who's a no? You're a no. Why are you a no?
Intrinsic value, that can be imbued into an object or an idea in any number of ways. That doesn't necessarily mean original. For instance, and I fear we're going to run into semantic grounds again, but for instance, if I offer a piece of jewellery that is one of a million and was in fact copied off a Prussian piece 200 years ago, but my grandfather gave it to me, then it has intrinsic value. It has intrinsic emotional value.
Andrew, what about you? In terms
again,
of
I can only talk about the design market from the auction side of things, and the intrinsic value is only with the original. So when the man who we cannot speak of, Featherston chair, appears on the market, it has no value. But when the original Grant Featherston chair is there, it will bring thousands of dollars. So the same thing with Charles Eames or with Gio Ponti, with any designer. What has happened to the design field is it's been elevated to the same categories as the fine arts field, really, where provenance has become very important. And we now live in an age where fashion and design are equated with art. And both in financial terms, but also in how rigorous it is to make sure something is authentic, is original.
And I suppose, too, that an original Grant Featherston that belonged to my parents, my grandparents, has such intrinsic value to me that I now walk past this really horrible shop in my neighbourhood, who's now doing replica Grant Featherstons, which I only discovered the other day. It just makes me ill. Elliot?
Well, I think that intrinsic value can obviously exist within an original object, whatever that is. But I also think that it can exist in non-original objects. So, for example, the code that built MySpace, the first version of MySpace, was an almost exact replica of the code that built Friendster. Friendster withered and died, and MySpace didn't. So I think there are a number of external factors that help determine whether or not an original or a derivative of something gains intrinsic value.
Sure.
Value is determined by market positioning. That might be the few things you say tonight, Chum, that I agree with. But
May there be no more.
we
We
got
only
an,
have- we
we got
only
an
have an
ocean
hour.
to swim together, that's for sure. So, but it's market conditions. So, all of us are seeing those Eames chairs go out of the valley. There's a value on those chairs. There's great sadness about the fact that they're being sold not as Eames chairs but as replicas. Unfortunately, the intellectual property, which was never intended to last forever, expired in the Eames chairs. So when the intellectual property expires, they can be sold as replicas.
But John, you know, are we not, well, okay,
Not in
I won't
America.
say we, I will say,
Or in
am
Europe.
I'll take this on me, you know, like, am I being a total bloody design snob by saying that in matte black, that is not an original Eames and that is really bad?
You're being a design snob, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I agree.
I don't care.
That's twice.
You know, well, what is it? You know?
We love you nonetheless.
Yeah, okay. I don't give a shit, really.
That's it.
If there is no other value in a product, then of course originality does become far more important. So as a new product, originality does have intrinsic, if you're speaking in those terms, it does have intrinsic value.
Yeah, true.
And you know, beyond that, I mean, I said so in the green room. If someone wants a particular aesthetic, then they pay for that aesthetic. Just as Richard made a great example, you may want a BMW coming out of university. You can't afford it. It's a replica BMW is a Hyundai, but we don't think of it in those regards. And it's a car. It has the same basic functions, but it's not that aesthetic. It's not that same brand value. And that's, well, for instance, the difference between
the replica does not follow the design of the artist. It is altered.
all
And
the
that's
all the process, all the
or
value
the process.
system.
So there is not only is there no intrinsic value, but it is stealing a genius for market consumption, and nobody's saying, wait a second.
But
You know,
then-
yes, Matt Blatt has been sued twice in Australia.
Has been
and-
sued twice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And he does get away with it now because in every advertisement it says replica of.
Yes.
You can no longer
Because
say,
he's playing the intellectual property game. He's
Yeah.
playing the game of intellectual property. And that's what designers have got to learn how to play.
But then again, you know, going back to the original idea of if my design is so bloody fantastic internationally, people want to copy me, isn't that a good thing?
No,
that's
well,
what Oscar Wilde thought.
Not if you want to make money, it's
I'm a
not.
fan, sorry. Not if you want to make money?
That's true. You get
Richard,
a certain
sorry?
time.
Well, yeah, I think commercially, you've got to get something back for what you've invested.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is, you know, if you think about it, I mean, when we look at, I'm not going to mention chairs because I don't want this to be an ad for what we sell, but if there's some of the things that we sell, one of them is the most copied chair in the world, right? Now, it was designed back in 1955. It's still going strong. So from an environmental perspective, it's done everything you need it to do.
Absolutely.
It's the most copied chair in the world, and you've got people like the person that you mentioned, I don't like to swear in public, that actually turn around and sit on the fence and wait until, like, the person that designed that did 10 of them. One was commercially successful, 1.5 maybe.
Yeah.
The other 8.5 were just, I guess, experiments along the way, as you can call them now. And in my view, when you get that one that rocks, I mean, surely it's your privilege, and I keep looking at it as an asset. You buy a house, the family owns it. What do? You pass it down. If that doesn't have to have a 70-year lifespan.
Three-dimensional copyright
Right.
doesn't last forever.
So, you know, you pass it down. It's an asset of your family.
Yeah.
And if they want to keep it, like I've got a house that belongs to my grandmother, I want to keep it. And part of it is I don't want it sold. Now, whether my kids sell it or not, I'm not sure about that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that if there's a watch, good example, $200, original
Is that
design.
all?
$200. $200.
Yeah.
It's a Danish watch, designed by one of the designers. Intrinsic value, heaps. I've got a watch which is probably like the BMW, which is worth a lot more, but they've both got different values for me. This one, given to me by the designer that's designed some of our furniture. The other one, it's the brand. It's the design. It's all those things. But
So, Richard, are we getting here that intellectual copyright from the original designer should be extended?
yeah,
Like Eames, like Featherstone, like Corbusier, dossier like Ms. van der Rohe.
So Richard's actually had the courage and the organisational stamina to actually approach our former Attorney General and begin to have this debate. Isn't it ironic that it took a retailer to do what designers should have done? There's a debate about intellectual property in Australia at the present time, and designers are not part of that debate. It took a retailer to do the designer's job.
But almost none of the creative industries are in that debate.
Oh,
It's only the intermediaries.
They're in the debate. It's just the intermediaries through collective rights management, with which I sense you'd have some issues,
I think that
it takes time to take part in the debate, and the musicians are certainly part of that debate, and the people who collect their royalties are part of that debate. Designers are no part of that debate. Retailers, using the work of designers, are trying to become part of that debate.
Well, another aspect of DIA is fashion, you know, and I know a number of major legal cases.
Good.
By fashion designers that you know, I designed the 2-inch zip. I don't know how they get away with that. You know, and then somebody ripped it off, so we take them to court. So there seems to be a lot more argy-bargy legally with fashion design than object design.
Yeah. I mean, I think the interesting...
That's because, sorry, just let me answer that. That's because object design is the subject of a specific registration which only lasts for a small amount of time.
Yeah.
So intellectual property, except in terms of brands go on until the return of Jesus Christ, but every other element of intellectual property has a shorter time frame. And respectfully, you got to get that, Mark. He gets it.
Okay.
You got to get it.
Okay. I'll practice. But we're getting to IP, which is question number 357 tonight. I'm going to ask now, okay, Scott, tell me, excuse me guys, just between me and Scott. This means audience, yeah, that means wrap up, that means you're doing really well. Okay, right, fantastic. Questions from the audience about intrinsic value of design? Any? Oh, come on. We don't want them keeping on talking for the next hour, do we?
Design without intellectual property struggles for intrinsic value. That's what he's suffering from. That's not what our auctioneer suffers from.
Hold on. Design
without intellectual property.
Without intellectual property.
Struggles for intrinsic value.
Struggles for intrinsic value.
Intrinsic financial value.
So, well, how do we, you know, if I design a new jewellery range tomorrow, what do I do so no one rips it off?
Go and see your patent attorney and get it
And how long will that last me? Before I can sue the pants off someone?
It'll last you 20 years. 20 years. The debate between how long intellectual property lasts is the constant debate. And every time copyright gets near to falling off the twig, Disney, wake up, extend Mickey another 20 years. Because the world's design policeman is America. It used to be when they had an economy. So
that's right.
Join the debate. There's a big one. There's goodies and baddies. They're on this panel here tonight. So come on down.
You know, guys, what I love about a panel is it's been brought to my attention. This is the third time I've done this, but just the body language of panel members, you know, and this is way off centre, but
I
those
firmly
who are
agree,
crossing their legs and twitching their foot really badly, they're really angry.
I think that every arts sector and every creative industry sector needs to be a lot more across intellectual property, because I think that it's actually an exceptionally patronising industry that says, you guys just go on being creators and we'll look after that for you.
No one's saying that. You're saying, let's go on being creative industries and we'll take away your copyrights.
That's not what I'm saying at all.
Okay.
What I'm saying is
Elliot, please explain in
well,
5
let me
words
ask
or
a
less.
question to the audience. If you're all creators, how many rights are in copyright? Just take a wild stab in the dark.
My God, is this a really uncreative audience or what?
No, this is what I'm saying.
How much are you involved in terms of creating, and how interested are you in the legalities of that?
It is pretty hard to be able to make strategic decisions about your intellectual property if you're not even sure what those rights are.
That's because design schools don't teach it.
I completely agree. Neither do creative industry schools. Like, you look at QUT Creative Industries, they don't teach copyright. I think copyright should be in every creative education.
No one in fashion, fine art, product design, communication design that I've ever taught in and still do have any idea about this crap.
I know, but I find that fascinating, right? This is a legally granted monopoly that gives you the ability to make decisions about the use and commercialization of your work, and you're not interested in knowing about it? That's crazy.
That's not good, Mark.
It's
well,
not good.
That's the idea that...
I don't like that we're agreeing on things. You're making us agree.
Come on down to the copyright world.
Okay, John,
I'll
make an appointment with you tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd like to prefer to
look,
see...
we have a question.
Oh, thank you. Hold on, wait for the microphone.
I suppose at least the idea of intrinsic value in the original. What are your guys' opinion on the intrinsic value of the way it's made or the idea? Because you're talking about watches and you're talking about things that we can't make, but you talk about this intrinsic value of music where you can copy it really easily off the internet. There's no value in that anymore.
That's going to...
I think from my perspective...
That's a big discussion.
You know, obviously I've got a couple of kids at school who I'm trying to suggest that doing that and what the implications are for those that created it. And I guess for me the value question here is what are we teaching, from my perspective, what are we teaching our kids, right? Because you can rip it off, or you can buy it on iTunes, or you can go buy a CD and do all that sort of stuff and do it the right way. Music has come
How
down.
much does iTunes pay to the artist, though?
Sorry?
Ever looked at that?
30%.
How much do streaming and on-demand services actually pay back to the creators?
I'm not talking about on-demand, I'm talking about buying on...
Well, but any service,
Elliot's right.
any content service like that pays shit all to the artists.
Well, interestingly enough, Elliot, when I downloaded Barbra Streisand's Greatest Hits the other night...
I'm sorry to hear that.
Why. Don't ask me why. I know. And it cost me like $4.95 on iTunes. I'm thinking, how much does Babs get for this?
Okay, but I think
I'm worried. I'm really worried.
The interesting thing here, though, is that there is a distinct difference between the content and the mechanical part of that MP3. So you have the musical work, which is part of the copyright, and you have the mechanical file. And the reality is, law says, no, you can't do that. Technology says yes. People listen to what the technology lets them do. I don't agree with it, but it's a reality. So you need to look at ways of responding to that. I mean, we've seen 10 years of the music industry trying to invent technology to fix that problem for them, which gets circumvented within a day of being on the market.
Yeah, I think we actually have a lot to learn from the music industry. I think we have a lot to learn from the music industry.
Here. Oh,
I am talking. I think we have a lot to learn from the music industry. And in answer to your question, these values will change as the technology changes, and that's something that Elliot's touched on. So, for instance, when we are selling digital files, as we do on, like, for instance, a Shapeways store, and someone prints that on their in their home machine, then then at that point, then I'm the only one who can protect my intellectual property. That's not what happens at the moment. You know, there are other people along the line who all have interests, and therefore they do that job. But certainly, you know, like, we're going to reach a point where we may have to look at subscription models for products, which I think is, you know, a very very reasonable idea. You know, you don't just like you buy a cell phone now either outright or you have a carrier model, or for instance you might subscribe to a cell phone, and I then could continue to issue you new designs or new iterations on that, and so long as you're subscribed, you have the most cutting edge cell phone that I can offer you.
So there's the opportunity of understanding intellectual property.
And of course, and in that context, of course, that does fall on me. At the moment, I sell a product to someone else who is an intermediary, and they are creating opportunities I couldn't create for myself, and therefore my time is more valuable as someone who can create those ideas than someone who can protect those ideas. And that comes back to the point I tried to make earlier as well.
Thanks, Bill. Do we have another question over here?
There seems to be a great focus on the intrinsic financial value of things. What about the intrinsic artistic and or cultural value from the original?
That's true.
That's part of the intrinsic value, its cultural impact. That's all tied up really in one, I think, from my point of view.
Sure, but to play devil's advocate, I mean, provenance can also come from something that is attached to a figure in history. So, for instance, if you could have a copy Eames chair that was owned by Mick Jagger, and that's going to have more value than a copy Im's chair that's come straight off the floor. And so there is cultural value that can be embedded into anything, and that's of course the messy thing about dealing with emotional and cultural capital.
Well, I suppose, yeah, that's a great question, because it's all about money. So far, it's all about almost money, you know, and it's about that that connection with something that's historic or within our own family. Sorry?
Money makes the world go round.
Well, but I think it's
that's a song out of Cabaret, isn't it? Yeah, I've heard that.
It's not really all about money. I mean, I don't know around here who's been to Denmark, but I mean, I visited there for the first time when we started this business, and honestly, it is a place that once you go, you just understand that there is a culture, and if you look at, I keep saying there's 5 million people, there's 23 million in this country, and their culture, 80% of what they do is export. You know, when we sit there and we listen to all the election promises, there is nothing there that says we are going to invest or we're going to encourage you to invest in design.
Well, Richard, I reckon before, whenever the next election is going to be, we could work on that.
Yeah.
Yeah? We've got a couple of years, maybe?
But that's not just happening in Denmark. I mean, New Zealand as well.
Exactly.
The game. But it does come down to the fact that there's no support. In this country, there is no support. Joanna's left the room, I hope. From a federal level, there's no real support of design. There are pockets of the government that are actually trying to embed design into business and manufacturing and things like that. But even just the fact that this country doesn't have a national design policy is insane. Like, there is no value placed on design at all.
So don't we have, do you guys, is it only Victoria where I'm from, that have a 3% all new construction involves a design element?
New South Wales as well, I think it's either 2 or 3%.
Yeah, sorry Andrew.
Is it a design element or an arts element?
Arts element.
It's an arts element, not a design element. And they're two totally different things.
Okay.
I mean, Queensland used to have the arts policy where, am I speaking too much again?
Yeah, that means,
that
means shut up.
The Queensland government used to have a arts, that any new building had to have some artistic component that was in part of their budget. But it's more about. It's more about. Sorry, I'm not
sure. There's no arts Queensland anymore, is there?
No, there is.
There is, yes.
Oh. But there's only one of her now. No. No, but the thing is, in New Zealand, they're embedding design, the whole idea of design and manufacture and making better products and focusing on the user, and that's creating better products. Without that, New Zealand is like Denmark, they're very small. Without export, they are nothing. But the New Zealand government has embraced it, and it's made a huge impact on their economy.
There's not a lot of support for design in government here, in part because, well, of course, our government reflects. Sorry, that's not. It's really not my point. I'll get straight past that, and you can debate me in a moment. My point goes to the fact that the government reflects what the population wants, and in Denmark, for instance, visiting family there, they will have a Borg Morgensen lounge and an ox chair, a beautiful leather thing. They're all originals. Everything is fitted out with Danish design, and they have a 2-year-old son that drools and crumbles all over it. And their view is they live with these things because that'll last in a way that something else that isn't covered in leather doesn't last. They want those things around them. They don't treat them as museum pieces or status symbols. They are simply the fabric of their lifestyle, and as such, that's fundamental support. And if then it's not surprising then that the government would reflect that.
It also talks about the fact that in Australia to own an Eames chair is almost a status symbol.
Yeah, that's right.
That it's not just a chair.
Well,
that I think is part of the problem. That it's this is why we have the Matt Blacks of the world, because people want that stuff. Sorry, swearing in public. But people want that stuff, but they don't understand that value that.
So the real Eames we put on a pedestal in the dining room,
price point and everything else like
Eames,
that.
We get the kids to dribble over.
Yeah.
No,
well, somebody said that they have the real stuff inside and the fake stuff outside.
Hi.
So
another question.
You keep saying that comes back to money, but what about sustainability? If you're looking at these replica pieces that are just falling apart.
The original always sustains much, much longer. They're
Yeah, so
much
if someone
more
buys an
inferior
original-
quality product. The copies that are coming out, the construction of them, which is going back to the licensing, a licensed Charles Eames chair, as we said earlier, one was made in the original that was accepted is 1955, 56. There is still the one that you buy today, which is licensed from the original manufacturer. Therefore, the weight of the metal of the foot is the same as it was in 1956. The lamination of the rosewood casing, the quality of the leather are all, again, dictated by the licensee, Knoll. Whereas the one that is coming out of MB, or in fact, there are about 3 different copyists now in Sydney. Virtually on every corner you can find them. There is no quality control on any of them. You can buy the egg chair or the swan chair, and what the problem is if you look at them, they are tremendously varied from the original design. They're in fact quite ugly and brutal next to the elegance of the original design. The problem is nobody's being taught good, better, best, or being taught how to see. Most people walk into Matt Blatt and will walk out of there and say, I'm buying an original Charles Eames chair. Even if it says replica. What does replica mean? What does style of mean? What does, after?
And what they fail to identify is that something that is cheaper is seeing that people are not being properly compensated along the way, and that is unsustainable from a economic point of view. You can't always be the cheapest on the market. There's always going to be someone who's trying to undercut it. It was China. Now a lot of furniture is being made in India, and that's something that is an authentic design is cost that much because someone can make a living, a very good living, work in a developed nation, making a piece of furniture that someone making it in China can't hope to do, for instance, and that's not sustainable.
But I must say, in terms of sustainability, that if we are able to afford high-class design at a low level, that it will last for maybe a year or 2 and then we throw it out, sort of the IKEA sort of thing, So rather than treasure it and it lasts a long time, it ends up in landfill.
Sure, but that's design, isn't it? That's speaking about design, a very top level kind of fashion. That's what I was saying. Aesthetic treatment, like for instance, and IKEA is quite an offender. They have a lot of other Alto replicas that I'm sure the ubiquitous cafe stool, for instance, is an Alto replica. There are probably more of those than there are the originals, and people don't understand that. And it is, of course, of a lower quality. And in some regards, there is something to be said around sustainability. So, for instance, on things being the same weight and and so forth isn't necessarily the most sustainable. If it would to be made now, it's sustainable because it was made in 1955, and therefore it has paid its carbon embedded carbon cost over that time. Right. Now, of course, that's the licensed products are being made in different manners to address that problem. For instance, the Eames chair is no longer being made in fiberglass; it's being made in rotational molded polyethylene, precisely to address that sustainability issue.
Okay, I'm getting this sound. Oh, you're raising a glass. That means it's time for a break. 10, 15 minutes? Is it called this a networking break? 10? Thank you, Scott. Guys, thanks, guys. We'll get back to question 3 after our little break. Cheers.